KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother, Dagan, for the first time ever on camera on a podcast, Moriarty. Dagan, how are you today?
The Lord judges, I act.
Yes. Excellent.
This is all your idea. Let's just set it out right from the start.
Yeah.
This cockamamie harebrained scheme was all Colin's idea.
Definitely was. We're going to do some KnockBack episodes on video now. Woo! I think we'll record them all on video just because Riverside is so easy to use. And then we'll put them up as we feel like. Here's the thing, Dagan.
Please.
We have the Last Stand Media YouTube account. And I feel like a lot of these episodes we do would fit there. And so my thought was like, why aren't we just recording these on video? Our watch time on YouTube is enormous. People do sit there and watch these 2-hour videos. So I'm like, why not try it? And why not start? Yeah, exactly. And why not start with BioShock?
Seen this face. They've seen that face, but now they may rethink their desires. But
indeed.
We'll see how it goes. Now, am I a little overdressed? This is what the kids are wearing on YouTube now, right?
Yeah, you look great. You look like $1 million. You look like $1 million bucks. I didn't anticipate this.
Knockback green, right? You have no idea what I'm wearing down here. Maybe my shirt's not even tucked in. Who knows?
Dude, when I went to Catholic school, I used to do the roll, Instead of tucking my shirt in, you would just roll it up. So it would look like it was tucked in.
That's a good idea. See, I never
They used to get so mad and the nuns used to come and like pull your shirt to see if it was fucking psychopaths. What were these women doing?
Nuns.
Yeah. I'll get a little bit closer on the mic, Dave, just to make sure that we're getting you there.
All right.
Now, how do you feel? You watch a lot of this stuff. You are a YouTube, a purveyor of YouTube, let's say.
I'm a great appreciator of YouTube.
You are.
I want to apologize to YouTube.
Dave, you've been doing a YouTube thing. Long before most people I knew were like really in the YouTube stuff. You've been,
from the outset.
Yeah.
Really. So that's why I want to really convey my apologies early on to YouTube for actually partaking. It's one thing to enjoy YouTube content. It's another thing to be on YouTube. But we'll see how it goes. Hi, guys. That's my first video. Hi, guys.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So
this is big.
Now, what's exciting about this, too, for us, Dagan, is that, we should introduce the show because there's a whole new audience of people that don't know the show exists or have just been ignoring me for years, right? I'm like, please listen to KnockBack. And they're like, Colin, shut up.
Why would I do that?
Right, exactly. So this is our retro and nostalgia podcast. Dagan is my brother. He's my older brother. And we do this every week. We've been doing it since early 2018, doing it well. And we cover video games and TV shows and movies and all that kind of stuff in kind of the nostalgic lens. And of course, it's supported on Patreon, like all of our other shows, patreon.com/laststandmedia. You don't have to listen to it or watch it here. You can listen to it on Spotify or iTunes or whatever. But I feel like this will be a nice accompaniment. And we actually have a nice set of a few topics that I think we're going to roll out over the next few weeks. Yes. And we'll see how the show does here. If you guys like it, and I think you will, then we'll keep it coming. Why not?
Why not?
Why not do that? So I don't know. I'm really, I'm excited. It's good to see you. I feel like our show will be, here's what people have been saying about the shows this year is that the shows have been even better because we can finally see each other again. And you and I used to record KnockBack in person back in the day. And so I think this will improve the show. What do you think?
I think so for sure. That's one thing I was thinking about is that it's going to be so nice to see Colin again. We used to come here to Philly. I used to go to LA. We recorded the shows in person. There's a whole different dynamic when you're in the room, especially with somebody that you're familiar with and that you enjoy their company and the conversation and everything. And I've been noticing that, Maddie and Chris and everybody, they're doing such an amazing job with the new podcast with Duke and everything. So I've really been enjoying it, actually. The dynamic is just so much different when I enjoy a podcast, too. Don't get me wrong. Audio podcast, no problems with that. But yeah, when you add the visual, component to it, I think it brings a little something else. So I'm excited. My only concern is this, Kyle. I'm afraid that the video is going to strip me of my mystique.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Sure.
I was the only, kind of Last Stand Media guy not on camera now. So now I got, with you YouTube superstars, you know.
Wouldn't go that far. There are people
All
on
right,
YouTube that get
stars.
as many views in 1 minute that I do in a month, but no, it's interesting. I mean, it's exciting for me. I feel like I've grabbed hold of you and just brought you into a place doing different things than you usually do, like your animation and your art, where you have a lot of talent and ways to express yourself. I think it's exciting. I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised, not only by your aesthetic, but indeed by the quality of the show. And the comments will be fun because when a lot of people didn't know what Dustin looked like. And then my favorite comment that I thumbed up and put the little brand on so it would stay at the top was Dustin's head is perfectly round or something like that. And I was like, yes, that's the comment that will stay there at the top. So
ingenious. We'll
see how it goes. Now, Dig, I mean, before we get into the topic today is BioShock Infinite, the 2013 video game on PS3, Xbox 360, PC, later ported to PS4 and Xbox One. This was voted on, by the way, by our audience a long time ago on Patreon. And it's funny because they voted for us to do, I think, BioShock and BioShock Infinite. We did BioShock, and then I was like, we should really do BioShock 2. Yeah. So we did that as well, and then we did Infinite. And I'm really excited to hear what you think about this. But before we get into that, I'm just curious. We always kind of try to start our show with just a little, let's ease into it.
Sure.
I'm kind of curious what's happening in your life. What do you want to talk to me about this week?
You know what? I was thinking a lot about, I love the little icebreakers at the top of the show. I think it's fun. But yeah, you know what? I've just been thinking about, I can't get away from the snow, you know? I think it's the older I get. You've been getting a lot of snow out here for those of you who aren't in the Northeast United States. We've been getting a lot of snow. And even down in Virginia where Colin is, they've been getting a good deal of snow. Yeah. And it's just so crazy how much that snow could just change the whole dynamic and the look of the week. And I think earlier last week I said that, you know, it seemed like anywhere from like 8 to 12 inches was, you know, that was a game changer for your day, for the week, for shuffling the kids around, getting off to school, getting the cars out of the driveway, so on and so forth. And maybe it's just compounded by, the whole COVID thing right now. That doesn't make anything easier, certainly for any aspect of life. But we got like another 3 or 4 inches one night during the week. And that was just like, it just turned everything upside down again. And I'm just wondering now, those of you in the Northeast know, like the last couple of years, we've been spared of the snow largely. We had a little dusting here and there, but now we've had like a serious winter so far in February. And I'm wondering how much of it is that, how much of it is just like being in my age, 47 years old, and dealing with like, I used to think the snowblower would be such a boon, but it just feels like shoveling to me now. It's just like, you got to get it out. You got to push it. Things heavy. It's like, so that's been a thing where it's like, and you go through those things, especially being from the Northeast, you have different emotions during each season, different seasons. But so you always go through those little tantrum periods where it's like, I'm moving down south. I've had it with the snow. But I think that sentiment now, not just for me, but for my wife, for Helene too, is like, no, I think we really don't like this anymore. Like, I think the South looks more and more appealing with every flake that falls down. So that's been sort of the large part of our last couple of weeks. What about you? What's going on down there? How's the weather down there?
Yeah, it's snowy. I mean, it's kind of mixing up between, a sleet, frozen rain and snow, but it rained yesterday and then it snowed and then it rained on top of it. So I was outside today because Micah came back, my girlfriend. For people that don't know, Micah, she's back for a little while, and I wanted to clear the driveway. Usually I don't give a flying fuck. I mean, I don't, it's like the snow can stay in my driveway forever. But I cleared it out and I was out there for like 2 hours because the snow was so frozen. I was like out there with like my hockey stick, like bashing it. And
wait, you don't have a shovel?
I probably look like a psychopath. No, I have a shovel, but
but you need to break it up.
But you got to break it and then I did the thing that you really shouldn't do, but it's always so tempting, which eventually I went and got like a ton of hot water and dumped it on it. You really shouldn't do that because then it creates more ice. So it's like, but like I just wanted to break this one piece of ice. And then the funny thing that I wanted to tell you was, and this is very me, is because I'm so OCD and persnickety, is I put all of the snow that I shoveled, all of it, all on the driveway, everything on the sidewalk, the porch. I put it all in this one spot. I have like this, I don't know what it is, like it's probably like 4 feet, 5 feet by 5 feet, where you might put a tree or something like at the corner of my driveway next to like the next person's property. And I put it all on that square, all the snow.
Why?
I don't know. I just felt like doing it. Like eventually it became a game to me to like get as much snow on this thing as possible, so it looks insane.
That's going to be there till August.
Yeah, probably.
That's actually a great idea. Like, you see the giant towering snow hills in like the supermarket parking lot when it snows a lot, and they're like literally there till like May to like actually try. There should be snowplow guys in that strip mall parking lot trying to do that. Like, let's make this pile stay here till September.
Yeah. Or like
it stay
the next
Halloween.
season. Like now those big snow piles. It reminds me because when I worked landscaping, I did a lot of snow removal and stuff like that at Northeastern, and I was like the lowest man on the totem pole. So they used to send me when it would snow, and then there would be piles of snow, and then it would start to melt. They would send me out every day to go to the various piles and pick garbage out of it. Because as like, it would melt into like this pile of garbage. So you had to kind of keep up with it, like by pulling the Cheetos bag out of the snow and all that. And every day I'd have to go and like climb these snow piles and like, yeah.
That was a thing. That was a job. Wow. That's a menial task.
Meanwhile, the guy that the foreman was in his truck smoking weed in the parking lot. It was,
of course he was.
They eventually caught him. I remember smoking weed. We all knew he was smoking weed, but he would just like disappear. Like that guy didn't do anything.
Oh, every day that was his thing?
Yeah, every day. He was awesome. He would come, we would have breakfast at like 8 a.m. Like all of the landscaping crew would have breakfast and like everyone would kind of get their assignments and then he would just disappear. Oh, that was the end. Then you'd see him the next day.
I love that guy.
I'm not going to say his name because he was a really nice guy, but he didn't give up. He was I was 18 when I got that job and I knew at 18, I'm like, this guy's checked out. Like whatever being checked out is and like being done with like adult life and working and all that, that's the guy.
Oh, dude, that's
smoking joints in his truck.
I'm an appreciator of that. This is what I should have started the show off rather than talk about the snow again. This is what I wanted to ask you earlier, just based on me wearing. This is the length I'll go to for a dad joke, by the way. I planned this out all day. This is going to be a whole different ball of wax now doing the visual thing because this is what my kids have to put up with. Now our loyal viewers have to put up with this. But it prompted a question in my head, Kyle, I wanted to ask you. And for the listeners out there too, think about this. And I don't know where I stand on this. Is it better to be overdressed? Like, let's say you go to like on a second or third date to a baseball game and you have to wear like a tuxedo, because that's the only clean clothes you have and you want to impress this girl or this guy, whatever. Or is it better to be underdressed? You show up to a wedding in a pair of jeans. What's your preference?
No. First of all, there's always the guy at the wedding who's underdressed.
Oh, yeah, always.
Like where I'm like, what is this?
Always.
What? Like you're wearing like jeans and a polo shirt, I would love to be doing that right now.
That's the dressiest thing they have.
Even I'm not doing that, And no, I think I learned this the hard way. I think we all have. It is always better to be overdressed 100% of the time than being underdressed. I
think I agree with that.
There's no one's going to make fun of you for being overdressed as much as they're going to make fun of you or look at you weird for being underdressed.
It's a good point.
Being at, the Yankee game in a tuxedo is way less weird than being in the Yankee game, in a fucking barrel.
That's fair. That's fair.
It's a good question though. It's a fair question. All right.
Let's do it.
Dave, the topic today for the audience, BioShock Infinite, which launched March 26, 2013. It was very late. As everyone knows, it was announced in early 2010. This is the third BioShock game, but really the second core BioShock game that Ken Levine acknowledges. Ken Levine wasn't involved in BioShock 2. And this is Ken Levine's last game. Kevin Levine still hasn't released a game since BioShock Infinite. So we're going on 8 years now. And he's working on a game up in Boston. 2K is involved. Irrational Games, his old studio, doesn't exist anymore. His new studio is called Ghost Story, as people know. And it's very weird to have a studio in Boston. There are not many of them. So like the biggest one before Irrational was Harmonix. So yeah, BioShock Infinite. And we want to deliver this one to you, of course, because it's a game that I really love. I have a complicated relationship with this game, though. And I'm really interested, Dagan, what you think of this game. I mean, I feel like I just want to ask you questions about what you think because this has been talked about a lot. I've talked about this game before. I have a lot to say about it now, but I have no idea what you think of this game. And it's a game that it's not as important to me as the original BioShock, but it's certainly up there and it's certainly climbed in esteem for me over the last few years. So what did you think about your experience with this game overall?
Oh, yeah, I couldn't wait to get into this because you and I sometimes will talk about a topic a little bit, not too much. We're usually pretty disciplined with waiting to the show to sort of unleash our sentiments and all of that. But this was one thing. I know you've talked about this game at length. It's one of the fabled games of yore, and I know you've talked about it at length. But I never really was privy to those conversations, so I can't wait to get into it with you. But I really, really enjoyed this game. Now, of course, Ken Levine, crazy, brilliant genius. I think, and also kind of exciting for KnockBack that we kind of rounded out doing a whole trilogy of games now with this third one now, into having, sort of finishing the conversation, as it were. And I couldn't wait to get into it because I don't know what I was expecting. I don't know if I was expecting this game, first of all, for as many twists and turns and secrets and reveals in this game and everything. Nothing was spoiled for me, which was a lot of fun. And of course, because I missed those conversations, 7-8 years ago. So I was never privy to any of those dialogues. So I was able to come into it fresh with a fresh set of eyes, really completely unspoiled. But I don't know if I was expecting like more of a sophomore, I guess in this case, a junior effort. BioShock, that fabled game, and, BioShock 2 I really enjoyed as well. But I don't know if I was expecting just kind of an also-ran, like, what happens with the third iteration of things. It could be great, it could be Return of the Jedi, or it could be, just milking and cashing in on a name in this case. And I think I was kind of half expecting that. And I was quickly very surprised how special this game is. The story, I really enjoyed the gameplay as well. I found it to be very fluid. I really loved the characters. And of course, you come to a Ken Levine joint for the story and the lore and how intricately thoughtful everything is. But I was really, quickly I realized that this game was also a huge departure and very inventive from the first BioShock. They really set out to do something different. I know the making of stories with, wanting to try different things. Are they going to return to Rapture? They had at one point considered, I guess, doing a medieval or Renaissance style thing, and then Assassin's Creed sort of revealed that they were doing that, and then they had to rethink. But thank God they did, because Columbia and Booker and Elizabeth and all the characters and the story and everything are really, really a treat. And I really enjoyed every minute. Now, here's my bone to pick, and I did mention this to you a little bit. I couldn't wait to reveal this to the audience too. And this is maybe speaks to my OCD and my craziness. I read initially this is going to be a 10-hour game. I saw some people saying 6 to 8 hours. I saw some people saying a dozen hours, but not a huge time sink necessarily. I just saw a speed run posted yesterday, and now speed runs are a little different, but it was like a 2-hour thing. But this game probably took me close to 40 hours. And I mentioned this in our Horizon Zero Dawn episode that I especially when I'm sort of pulled into a game and I find it magnetic and I'm really enjoying it, I try to go slow and really just kind of enjoy my time with it. The kids are in bed. It's late at night. I'm not animating. Work is over. We're just relaxing. I have a little dad time to myself. And I really just try to like get the maximum out of a game. And this one, for me, it was almost a little bit like questioning my own sanity. I'm like, this is going so far beyond what people say it should take. And I know I'm being sort of methodical with my exploration and powering up, and especially powering up my weapons, which I found really enjoyable. I found the first-person shooter aspect of this game really enjoyable for me. I'm relatively new to it, so it's still a kind of a thrill for me. But that was the biggest thing. My biggest bone of contention eventually was like, this... I know, like, I usually take a little long. My wife calls me the world's slowest New Yorker. But this was, like, to the 10th degree of, like, taking maybe, like, apparently, from what people say, like, 3 times the amount of time this game should take. But even that being said, all humor aside, I really, really dug my time with the game from soup to nuts. Now, let me hear it from you, Kyle. Now, I know you're a huge Ken Levine fan. I know you love the first BioShock. We spoke about that. By the way, you guys, if you want to kind of make this a trilogy of KnockBack listening, you'll have to go back to the audio podcast. But I think BioShock was episode 55. Did I write it down? And BioShock 2, I think, was episode 129, so not that long ago. So you guys could make a trifecta of BioShock podcasts. Revisit the games. But talk to me about BioShock Infinite for you, Kyle. And also, I'm always so eager to get your perspective because you're so much more familiar with all the more contemporary games. So I love the game. One of my favorite games. I would say besides Horizon, one of the games I dug playing the most. I really, really enjoyed it. What about for you? Where do you put this with PS3? Where do you put this with all contemporary games?
Yeah, but so first of all, I want to dissuade dissuade the fears of some people. Oakley Waldron wrote into us and asked if you had spoiled it for yourself going in, so it's good. I surprisingly didn't spoil it for myself going in either. So because I hadn't beaten the game until years after it came out, and yeah, so we'll talk about this.
Okay.
So the game came out in 2013. It was delayed many times, and it was a very late PS3 and Xbox 360 game, but incredible anticipation, one of the best selling games of that year. And it was a game that I played. I remember playing it, I think even before it came out. And I was like, no, and I was already a huge BioShock fan at that time. And I love BioShock, the original BioShock. And for some reason, it just didn't, I don't know. It's similar to what you were saying. Like, I don't know what I was expecting here, but it's not what I thought it was going to be. And I felt like my initial feelings on it were it's too shootery and too kinetic. This is not what BioShock is. You kill way more people in BioShock Infinite than you ever kill in the original BioShock. It feels a little strange from that perspective. And it's funny how many letters we got about this, because Kyle Melendez wrote in about how many people remember me having a problem with this. And he says, hey guys, I've been waiting for this topic for a long time, as this game is in my top 10 of all time. And I don't hear a lot of people talk about it. So I'd love to see you guys dissect this one. Colin, I've been a fan of yours since Beyond 300, and when this game was out, it disappointed me that you weren't into it, especially knowing how much you love the original. It has brought me much joy to hear you say over time you finally got to this game again and see the greatness of it. There's so much to talk about, not just with the complex story, but all the behind-the-scenes tumultuous cycle as well.
Well said.
So I played it, and people can go look at my trophies, but I think I got like halfway through it, and I was like, I just don't want to play this anymore. And in 2013, and
wow,
I was like, I don't know. I don't know what I was expecting. I don't know where my mind was at the time. It's hard to kind of put myself back in that place in time. I don't know. I probably played 500 games since then. I mean, I'm not even kidding, So So I don't remember. I remember kind of playing it and not enjoying it and kind of sticking to that. It's funny how over time you kind of just reinforce how you feel about something by just saying it over and over again. It wasn't that I ever went back to it again. I was just like, no, I don't want to play BioShock or BioShock Infinite. So in early 2018, as people know, in 2016, the game's reported to PS4 and Xbox One. The Xbox One ports weren't really a big deal because it was already backwards compatible on Xbox, but we didn't have that on PS4. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go play the original BioShock again because I love it. I platinumed it again, right? And I already have the platinum on PS3. And then I was like, all right, I'll play BioShock 2 again. It's got a new list of trophies, no multiplayer, awesome, platinumed it. And then I was like, all right, I guess I'll play BioShock Infinite again. So I started up and immediately I'm like, what was I thinking? It didn't even take more than a few minutes where I'm like, what? Like, what? Where was the Americana, the beautiful, like weird history, like turn of the century history? And I was like, I don't know. I must have been in some sort of weird state of mind, some sort of pot haze or something when this game came out, because I don't know what I was thinking. The end result, of course, is that it's brilliant. This game is brilliant. I don't think it's as good as the original BioShock. I don't know that it's ever going to be. I don't know that the original BioShock really can be matched. Even with this new BioShock game that's in development now, without Ken Levine, the fourth BioShock game technically, I don't know. It's like there's no chance it's going to be as good as the original BioShock, but even if you can kind of sniff BioShock, I think it's going to be awesome, better than average. So that's kind of where I stood. And there are a lot of interesting things. I mean, Columbia, the Americana, Comstock, Booker and Elizabeth, the enemies like Songbird and the Handyman and all of that. I mean, there's obviously the environmental storytelling is through the roof. I still think BioShock and BioShock Infinite have some of the best environmental storytelling ever. And the audio diaries and all of that. I love all that stuff. And I hope this time you listen to the audio diaries. I know you skipped that the first time you played BioShock.
Yes, I did.
So you missed like the whole story. So
I'm learning. I'm still learning.
It is. Well, the audio diary thing is contentious because people think it's a cop out. I personally like that stuff. But people think it's a cop out. My whole answer is like, well, what the fuck do you want them to do? Like, I don't know do you want them to just stop the game every 2 seconds to tell you? Or, I think. So, Dave, let me start here. And I think that there's a lot to talk about here. We're not going to be able to touch on everything. I almost feel like we can do another episode on this someday. But what did you think of Columbia? I really thought about you. I was writing notes and I'm like, I got to ask Dagan about Columbia first and foremost, because as an artist, I feel like Ken Levine is clever enough to go like, we did the opposite of Rapture on purpose. And we want you to think that it's the opposite of Rapture on purpose by design, but really it has nothing to do with anything. It kind of draws you in. And what I find is the game is less horror. It's actually more scary though, in a lot of different ways, because it feels a lot more real. It doesn't feel as detached as the libertarian utopia underwater. This feels much more real. It's intertwined with the American government. Colombia seceded from the United States. There's all this crazy shit. So talk to me a little bit about your kind of thoughts on Colombia as the setting.
That is interesting, everything you said too, Kyle, because this game, that was one of my first thoughts, maybe 10 or 15 minutes in, was like, this game is so Colin. This game is so, it just feels like Colin, not just because it's a brilliant story and it's really fleshed out and thoughtful with great characters. And, again, that's why you come for a Ken Levine joint, right? But just the Americana, the old school Americana and all the trappings. I was like, wow, this is so Kyle. But Colombia is one of the most, now that you get from A to Z and you finish the game and you look back in retrospect, Colombia is one of the most brilliant aspects of the game is this setting. And I love the way it flies in the face of what has come before. With Rapture, you had, I guess really what I'm saying is I love the contrast between the two. With Rapture, you had this already rotting and sort of decaying place, an intended utopia or an intended paradise, but now sort of rusting and destroyed. And when you get there, it's already overrun by, essentially drug addicts. And it's a straight up dystopia. It's scary. It's foreboding. And with Colombia, first of all, the atmosphere is beautiful, but it's a really unique style of atmosphere for me. It's this bright, sunny, polished world, picturesque. Everywhere you go, there's a view. It's a floating city. So, you have this seemingly perfect place, blue skies, vast picnic areas, and glistening town squares. There's an air of everything being festive with flags and banners and balloons. Like Ken Levine says, it's like a flying, was seen as like a flying World's Fair. And that's what it feels like, bustling with people. It's not just, that's the thing with the initial BioShock. It was like everyone you came across was like a monster.
Yeah, they were spliced, pretty much all.
Everybody's spliced, or you run across the big daddies or whatever. But here you have a community, bustling with people. Everybody's enjoying themselves and the amenities that this place offers. And everybody seems upbeat and there's prosperity and they seem content. But the crazy thing is, the eerie thing is that there's something bubbling beneath the surface. There's something very wrong underneath this glistening facade. There's something sick underneath here. There's something poison. There's a malevolence brewing. And it from the very beginning, you get that sense, even though everything on the surface seems very welcoming and accessible. And as the game progresses brilliantly, the true nature of the world slowly reveals itself. And that's part of what compels you at least for me, through the game.
One of the first things that is noticeable in the game that you see after I think you push through all of the people praying and stuff like that, you enter Colombia after finding your way to the lighthouse off the coast of Maine, whatever it is. And you see these three statues of Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and George Washington, right? And what you realize is that they've deified these people. And I think what's interesting about Colombia and what's interesting about BioShock Infinite is that all of its thematic elements, both through the lens of 1912 and through the lens of today, it's almost true in some sense, or it has almost been true, right? There's no place in the world really that deifies its founding members like we do. There's nowhere like that in the world. We call them literally the founders in the United States, right? I don't know that terminology is used anywhere else, and they are deified. Actually, we've been hearing a lot in the news, obviously for obvious reasons, at the Capitol building, there's rotundas of statues of all of these men, and it is a sort of sacred thing. And I love that they just said, you know what? And Ken Levine and his crew was like, you know what? We're going to just take this to the nth degree. They will be the gods. As opposed to just kind of like, we kind of love George Washington. We named our capital city after him and all that, but we don't worship him. It's not like North Korea where you have a picture of Kim Jong-un. And,
right. Good point. Right.
The great leader. But in this reality, they kind of do that. And I wrote in my notes that I feel like What's interesting is that libertarian individualism was at the center of BioShock Infinite, almost anti-Americanism in a way. They didn't want anything to do with the United States. They kept themselves secret from the world. And this is about American nationalism, and such boisterous American and loud American nationalism that they literally fly over the fucking world, right? In Colombia, which, by the way, Dagan, we learned this at some point through the Lutece twins, no one even really knows how it works, which is one of the craziest things about Colombia. Like, no one actually knows outside of the twins and Comstock how this thing's even kept afloat.
Right.
So there's also this air of mysticism, and they refer to these different things both in the alternate realities, like the bombing of New York that we see, but also they were heavily involved in, like, Colombia basically attacked China. You know, and there's all this awesome alternate history. So that's the next thing I wanted to ask you is, what did you think about the trappings of the alternate history and the reality? So, like, Wounded Knee, that's really happened, but other things didn't happen. How did you feel about kind of the way they set up the alternate history to coalesce into this event?
They made it work so well. Because as fantastic as everything is, the story, you know, this breakaways, you know, once American city that kind of breaks off and because it becomes its own entity, you know, speaks of like shades of like Texas, right? Like today's Texas, right?
Sure.
It kind of feels
Texas
like that a little bit.
For people that don't know, Texas was a country before it joined the United States.
You know what I mean?
Only Vermont was a country too when it joined. I think those are the only two
I didn't
states.
know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
The Republic of Vermont. Yeah.
What's up, Bernie?
Green Mountain Boys, yeah. Ethan Allen, I was thinking about, but Bernie too.
Oh, there you go, yeah. But, you know, it speaks to me about all aspects of this game, that everything seems so fantastic, but it's grounded. Everything's believable. And I love the way they merge sort of the facts that, you know, the Pinkertons or Wounded Knee or different aspects of what might have been occurring in 1912 fashion music. And then, of course, that's genre bending too with the music that they introduced into the game. But the way they
girls
blend
just want
it
to have
all,
fun coming through the radio.
God, so good. That is so. I mean, the musical element again is so brilliant, bringing the modern music in, but playing the music in an old school way that would apply to that time period. Like everything about it is so brilliant and thoughtful and thought out. You know, and for me, it was. You know, this is a weird thing with this type of game, and maybe the most intense of the games we've played for KnockBack in this regard is that the story almost becomes a distraction. Like, I really love it. I love what you said about the shooter elements and the first-person shooter thing and being too shootery for you, at least initially when the game first came out and stuff. It's one of the aspects of the game that grabbed me, and I wanted to play it that way, to the detriment of even using the Vigors, which I'll talk about later on. But for me, it almost becomes like I'm so entertained by the fluidity and the gameplay aspects and just having fun in a shootery aspect. And also I'm really entertained by the story. And you almost want, for me, it was weird with this game. I almost wanted them in two separate things. Like I almost wanted the story of this game and the world building to be like a novel. So I could just play the game and not worry about what I was missing in the story, because I felt like the story gets very complicated. The characters, of course, it goes into interdimensional tears and it goes into a whole thing of sci-fi and the steampunk elements and everything cross over, and it gets very complicated, and it's brilliantly done, but it's almost intimidating. And everything I learned, I felt like I was missing. For every one thing I learned, I felt like I was missing two things because I was trying to concentrate on playing the game as well. So for me, it was that's the only reason it was frustrating, because it was so good. You know, I almost was like sorrowful over the things I might have been missing. So what I did was, when I finished the game, I went back in and watched cutscenes. Essentially, I try not to watch it with too much commentary or anything. Just straight up watching cutscenes and just learning about, besides the voxophones and everything, learning about any aspects that I sort of missed, just to kind of put the pieces together. But for me, it was, I mean, it's so brilliant. Everything that they explain, the amount of intricate detail that the story and the characters and the world building and everything. I just think it was so brilliantly done. I mean, you take an auteur like Ken Levine, and, you know, that's what they're about. You know, this guy could be crafting a novel or making a great cinematic movie experience. It doesn't matter. He just does that in a game. And the fact that, you know, I think that's what I loved about the game too. It had everything. It had the gameplay elements for me. I really enjoyed that. And it had the story building and, you know, the characterization and the memorable story and the characters that you walk away from the game with remembering. I mean, I think Elizabeth, for instance, is one of the great video game characters. And it's funny because when you first meet her, you don't really think it's going to go. You don't necessarily know it's going to go that way. By the end of this game, you're like, you're ride or die for this character.
Certainly. And then of course they twist it all up. I mean, it really ends up being that Elizabeth is Booker's kid, that the Lutece twins were. It's very, I still don't really understand the story in its entirety. By the way, it's worth noting that really it ties in with Burial at Sea, which is the DLC that connects the game to which is awesome. It connects the game to the original one intimately.
I can't wait to play that.
And like very intimately. It's dope. But we'll do a separate episode of that. So people did write in asking. I feel like that one needs its own episode. I don't want to fold that into this.
5 hours. So for me, it'll take 25 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was going to say it. I remember it being about 5 hours long. So we'll see how it came out in 2 parts. I remember. So I want to start at the beginning. What was your impression? We talked about Colombia and how beautiful it is, the blues and the whites, and always looking at these wonderful vistas. I always catch myself looking at scenery in video games. I don't know how you can't. And I often do it most in 2D games, actually, because I'm so impressed with pixel work, and parallax and all that kind of stuff.
Too.
But in these kinds of games, you can't help but look as well. But I wonder what you think about the parade that's going on in the beginning and the way it kind of seems like a happy-go-lucky place. It's definitely ominous. There's weird shit going on. But I wonder what you think about everything leading up to the number being drawn and all of that, and how everything kind of falls apart and then immediately descends permanently basically into chaos. What did you think of that intro? Because it is a little different than BioShock's in the sense that it's almost like you don't really understand. It goes on for a while. I mean, the intro before you really time to fire, it might be like 20 minutes in the game, which is pretty long.
Yeah.
But the intro is very memorable to me. When I was playing through it, I remember even in 2018, I remember being like, oh, I remember all of this. And so what did you think about that kind of parade-like atmosphere in the beginning? Well,
I loved it. I mean, and also because all of that, the community and the festivity and all of that stuff, it's like, well, what's the problem here? It's like, what are we up against? Now, of course, that's that's kind of what comes before in the game is him rowing up to the lighthouse.
Right.
You have this mysterious guy. He's getting dropped off. He's sort of, he's sort of this character that has origins. He has a past. He's dark. There's something going on with this guy. You don't exactly know what it is. And then he's thrust up into this sort of seemingly paradise. And you're like, what could be possibly happening? But it was so brilliantly done because the whole time, again, all as colorful as it is and as festive as it is, and the way everything seems sort of upbeat and everybody's happy and everybody's celebrating, everything's a celebration. There's something sort of bubbling right beneath the surface. That's going to pop off eventually. And it's going to, that's where the conflict is going to kick in. And that's where the story is really going to play out. And you're going to learn more about this character. I love that the rhythms of this game, the fact that there is a lot of sort of, I don't want to say, I mean, really, you don't really know what to expect. They really defy expectation with every incremental step in the game. And they, it kind of puts you on your guard and sort of dredges up various emotions, anger, fear, happiness, comfort. Then you're kind of afraid to feel like you're comfortable. And the rhythms of the game are really, really well thought out. You could tell they really developed the hell out of that aspect of the game where it's like every sort of step along the way is an experience and you never really know what to expect. And then the whole thing with Booker too is it's a character that I found kind of hard to get my meat hooks into because, he's kind of this unsavory type. He's this mercenary bounty hunter type. He's got, he's obviously committed atrocities. He's trying to run from a past. He's generally unpleasant. And eventually you kind of get down with Booker and being, kind of being behind this character or playing as this character because at a certain point you realize how atrocious the people are you're fighting against with their racist sentiments and all that kind of stuff. And then you meet Elizabeth and then you have this innocent, you're full of wonder, and then she's full of wonder and awe, and she's this imprisoned character that spent her life confined and now she's free and you have to protect her. And the way she draws sort of lightness out of the Booker character and sort of dilutes his darkness a little bit and how that changes the game. and how that changes the character, and by proxy, it changes the way you feel about the character, the way you feel about the game, sort of the stakes. So the fact of early Columbia in the game and how everything seems on the up and up and everything seems happy essentially, and the way that slowly kind of erodes and crumbles as you're introduced to different parts, you're introduced to the different areas like the ghetto areas and all that kind of stuff. And then of course the Vox Populi later on and this enemy, but also Kyle, very early on, you find that this is interesting, actually, something that the game did that I thought about. You see this sort of prosperous floating metropolis, right? This thing that they built, and it's gorgeous and it's huge and it's majestic and everybody seems happy and there seems to be prosperity. But you learn early on that it's built on all these crazy theories. It almost seems, and I don't mean to like single out Scientology or L. Ron Hubbard or anything, but it almost seems like culty, and it feels like all of this is built on this foundation of, you find out, racism and over nationalism and all this kind of stuff, where it's like, wow, this is built on, this city is built on salt, everything's going to crumble underneath it. And that's when you find out, like, the sentiments that all this is built on are wrong and in many ways evil and malevolent and misguided and all of that. And that, I think, sets up a lot of the shock later on. And again, just really defies expectation around every turn, because this is going to go south. Things are going to turn sour just because of what, the sort of philosophies that all this is built upon.
Yeah, it's again, they do a nice job of hiding it. You don't even really learn about the whole racist angle until somewhat deep into the game. Although if you pay attention, not super deep, but if you pay attention, it becomes obvious more quickly.
Yeah.
And yeah, basically they have a civil war going on. It's not unlike the original BioShock, which also is engulfed with a civil war, as we know. Now, we don't, up to BioShock Infinite's launch, we didn't see Rapture before the Civil War, although we will. So, so it's kind of interesting that it's like you said, a rhythm, an echo, right, between the two games. Although I don't think that the games share many echoes, which apart from this whole, the Vigors and all that kind of stuff, although they strip a lot of that back. I think that was another one of my problems in hindsight with the game when it came out, was that it seemed like a reaction, and I think it kind of was a reaction to the shooter hullabaloo that had been going on at that time.
I wanted to ask you about this. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that was, it's not as extreme as I remember it being, when I think when I first played it, I'm like, I'm killing, I don't want to kill anything. So I don't know. It's not as bad as I felt like it was, but it's a reactionary game. I think that's part of why it took so long to come out. And I feel like they felt like they needed to make it more shootery, and it ended up working out fine because it's very fun to play.
It is. Agreed.
Now, we talked about, just in passing, Comstock, Zachary Hale Comstock, the villain, the Andrew Ryan of this game. Although I think he's, clearly much more in the game than Andrew Ryan is. Although I don't know that I'm trying to think, you don't see, I just platinumed the game again on PS3 a month ago, so I should remember this, but you don't see Comstock. You actually see Andrew Ryan at some point in the game. You don't see Comstock, I don't think, in the game.
No, statues and stuff, right, like tributes and all of that, but not
right, because you see Andrew Ryan get killed in the original BioShock.
Oh,
so
right.
remember, like you beat him with the golf club or whatever.
Right.
So Comstock is much more in your business. And by the way, I gotta look because I forgot to write this down. I'm looking at the at his thing right now. Who's the voice actor that did Comstock?
I was just looking. He's brilliant.
It's Kip Van Heuvel. He's awesome. Comstock's voice acting is astonishingly good.
It's so good.
It's goosebump worthy it's very eerie because he just pops up and he talks, and he's got this, and a lot in voxophones as well. And the voice acting is just great. I think Comstock is an amazing villain. I love him. Obviously a horrible man, But what do you think about his whole, first of all, the religious aspects of it and the false shepherd and how they're kind of, songbird and all this weird stuff. It's like everyone just kind of accepts that this weird ass shit is going on. He's at the center of it. I'm curious what you think of this guy.
Oh, dude, it's so crazy that you shout out the voice acting, because even in all of the content that I listen to, people talking about the game, no one shouts out this character's voice acting. It's like, it's unbelievably, the quality of it is cinematic. It's like,
I agree.
And
Well
I know
said.
like voice actors or just performers in general, it's not even fair to call them voice actors, because so many, we talk about Troy Baker. I mean, he's brilliant. But yeah, the voice acting, it was like staggering for me early on. I was like, what, like this guy is unbelievable. And almost talk about exposition and the voxophones and the fact that people feel like they're kind of bogged down by the exposition of the game. I couldn't wait for this guy to talk again. I mean, just because of the voice.
I feel the same way.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so appropriate for the character. You talk about the embodiment of charisma, a leader of men, somebody who you could see people being brainwashed by. And again, for me, it struck almost instantly of an L. Ron Hubbard type, where it's like somebody who people, for whatever reason, just flocked around their philosophy, their ethos, the things they said, and wanted to be led by him. And, I definitely got those culty, creepy vibes from him, but it was Comstock and Columbia and everything was shades of what you hear about old school Dianetics, Scientology. And again, not to point fingers or cast aspersions at that thing, but that's what it smacked of to me, where it's like you have this guy who's irresistible in a way, like he that draws tens of thousands of followers, and you could understand why by his words, very cleverly worded, very articulate. There's a warmth to him, almost like the Saruman character from Lord of the Rings. Like you could see people spellbound by this guy.
Sure. And of course he's really Booker. You find that out at the end. Now, did you see that coming?
All. Not at all. I was shocked by that. And by that point, by the time you find that out, there's so many mysteries that are unraveled and revealed.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different realities, basically.
Dude, it's crazy. I mean, and it didn't feel cheap. It didn't feel like, you and I talk about playing action figures in a little, like, then get it, no, that's not the last boss. Here comes the lamp, then you guys have to fight the lamp.
The Mickey Mouse stuffed animal.
The Mickey Mouse or the giant Ninja Turtle or whatever stuffed animal. But it never felt like that to me. It almost felt like, wow, where is this going to end? But it was so well done. It was so well done. But no, I didn't see any of this coming. I mean, I don't think I saw any of it. That you see Elizabeth in another dimensional state of her being old and her taking over Columbia. And like Colin said earlier, attacking the United States, attacking New York City, for instance, and having an image of that's really haunting. That's a really haunting part of the game. But none of those mysteries were, felt like they were, a bridge too far. Nothing felt like a jump the shark. Everything felt appropriate, and it's sad. And I think Elizabeth is a character, especially Elizabeth, like she elicits your sympathy from very early on, at least for me. Like I want to see from the moment she joined, and you get a sense of who she is and her wonder and her sort of lust for life, and the fact that she's been confined and a prisoner since she was a little girl, and that she's finally out, and just everything she's awestruck by, even the tiniest details of this world. And it just elicits such a sympathy. Like you want to see her succeed. You want to see her get out of this okay. So, I mean, it's just everything you just kind of, I mean, for me, and then, seeing Booker's affection for her and seeing him go from a cutthroat and lying to her to actually being empathetic and actually being, self-sacrificing on her behest and all of that, and sort of turning and then finding out like that's actually fortunate because you're her dad, like that type of thing, right, with the initials carved in his hand and everything. I loved every single reveal, and it was, for me, everybody laughs at me. It was a pleasant thing to experience, something completely unspoiled.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, that's not your forte, so it's good to
certainly not,
because you could just love spoiling things for yourself. It's Comstock's the whole Comstock thing with Columbia and attacking Peking. It's really interesting. It's the China, in this alternate timeline, the United States is involved in the Boxer Rebellion, which really happens in the real world. The United States is not involved in it at all. The British are. And we fight. The Chinese, I guess, have prisoners, and Comstock unilaterally decides to attack them and then secedes from the United States. And then they just fly around the world. I mean, and they're just kind of untouchable. He's a pretty cool character. And it is very, the whole Comstock Booker connection and the thumb or the pinky rather getting cut off and all of that, which I loved. I remember seeing that for the first time. I'm like, oh, that's fucking super brilliant.
So good.
I want to talk about Elizabeth next, because you keep bringing her up, and she's obviously a very important character. We have a letter here from Evan Frankfurt. He says, "Gents, I find Infinite to be deeply engaging, and I attribute it to two factors. One, the world of Columbia is incredible. I find that the beautiful art style has me entranced, the setting visually, historically, and thematically, from the freaky religious undertones to the 1900s style buildings. The other factor, though, is Elizabeth. The relationship Booker forms with her over the course of the game is what puts this package over the edge as one of the best of all time. The interactions are fantastic, and Courtney Draper conducts what might be my favorite gaming voice performance of all time. Comparing this to the first BioShock game, where the relationships between the characters along the setting of the story... I'm sorry, let me read that again. Comparing this to the first BioShock game, where the relationships between characters along with the setting of the story enough for you to rate this as highly as the original. For me, they were. So he's wondering if the characters kind of bring it over the edge. I do want to give a shout out, as he says, to Courtney Draper. I'll never forget when she came. I've met her before, but I remember when she came to IGN when BioShock came out. My old friend Andrew Goldfarb is a huge fan of BioShock, and she recorded a voicemail message for him.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was something like, "Hey," it was like, "Hey, Goldfarb, catch," or something like that.
That's perfect.
Yeah, so it was pretty cool. I remember that very well. But she does great too, and Elizabeth's pretty hot, right? And you kind of wonder your first time through, like, why isn't Booker more interested in her? And you're kind of thankful at the end. That it's like the New Hope kiss, you know? It's like, oh no.
Exactly.
Could have gotten a lot more. Could have gone down a really troubling path. So talk to me a little bit. I mean, it seems like you're quite intrigued by Elizabeth. So what do you like about her? My favorite thing about her, I love the corset. I just love her whole look. I think it's super cool.
Oh, it's so cool. It really speaks to the time period. Very inventive. I mean, I think Courtney Draper, first of all, you have to stand toe to toe in the sound booth with Troy Baker, right? And I have to say, like, for somebody that doesn't have nearly the experience with the contemporary games of a lot of you guys listening and watching, and Colin especially, you wonder, like, even a guy like me, a casual gamer, comes in and says, "Oh, Troy Baker again? Like, really? Like, they couldn't get somebody else?" And then Troy Baker speaks for about 30 seconds, and then you're like, yeah, that's why it's Troy Baker. Like, that's how good he is. It's unbelievable. I know that's probably said at length, but I have to kind of bear down on that fact. Like, he's that good. I mean, I can't believe how great he is. And every time I hear him do a part, and Courtney Draper has to stand with him, and she does. Like, Elizabeth's a great character. The voice acting is wonderful. You know, again, just seeing this, it's so beautiful to see. Well, first of all, you know, you play with Booker for a while. You know, I don't know if it's a quarter of the game or whatever it is, but before Elizabeth, you even join up and become a pair. So when she comes into the game, she creates a whole new dynamic, not just in terms of the story, but in terms of the gameplay. And even a guy like me knows, like, oh, escort mission, this is going to be annoying. And she lends something to the game, not only in terms of the character and the storyline and fleshing out what's happening in this world, but, you know, being a part of the battle, you know, being a part of the adventure, and not being intrusive for the most part. I mean, she blocked a couple of doorways for me for a minute where it was really annoying, or maybe, like, you know, prevented access to, like, a chest I was trying to loot. But for the most part, she's wonderful. You know, I love the whole lock picking thing that she does. I thought that was really charming. And just the fact that there's a whole mechanic in the game, of course, you guys know, where, you know, she'll throw you the ammo, she'll throw you the salts, she'll throw you the money, or she'll throw you the life packs, the medical packs. And the fact that it's sort of like this thumbprint or snowflake type of dynamic in the game, where no game, it's sort of randomized, so no game is going to be the same twice, just because of that dynamic, if for nothing else. And the fact that there's some really cool AI that I was charmed by in the game, where if you don't use your Vigors, she's not going to throw you salt. for instance. If you continually go to the life packs, if you're continually getting your ass kicked, or you're continually running out of carbine ammo or something, that's what she's going to toss you, and the game adapts to that, which is really neat.
Yeah, it's cool.
And
I was going to say that. I'm so glad you brought that up.
It's so cool. It's such a it's such a simple mechanic, but for me, it's that type of thing where I'm left with, like, well, maybe this exists in dozens of games and I just don't know about it. That type of thing. But really for me is like, I was really touched by the character being this sheltered sort of soul, and the way she sort of compliments Booker. Here you have this sort of guy that's out for himself, this cutthroat mercenary type, doesn't really give a shit about anybody, just cares about settling his debt. He has this checkered past. He's just an unsavory character. And then he meets this girl who sort of who's the complete polar opposite as far as her personality, her dynamic, her sense of wonder. It's really touching early on when she dances on the beach and she wants him to dance with her, and just that lust for life because of, she's been sort of the Rapunzel this entire time. She's been locked up in the tower, and the fact that they change each other, not just the fact of playing as those two characters and both being along for the adventure, but that duo is what really makes the game. Those two personalities coming together and their feelings for each other and how they bring out something from each other. She draws out empathy from him, and, not just being out for himself. And he draws out a confidence in her. She has this ability. She has this, this ability to exploit these interdimensional tears, and she's scared of it. And she was taught to be scared of it. And she was taught to be limited by it and not really believe in herself. And he brings that out of her, like a confidence and a comfort in who she is, which is really cool. And that's really striking when you find out that he's her dad. He's the father figure. He's actually the father because that's sort of how he's been acting all along anyway since they met. Yeah,
it's funny because I agree with you. She seems like she's going to be annoying at first. Escort missions have a horrible reputation in games. People are getting away from them. What's funny about Troy Baker's involvement in this game, of course, is that 2013 was a hell of a year for Troy Baker because he played this in March, and then by June he was Joel in The Last of Us. And it's funny because they're both kind of similar games where a man who doesn't seem to give a shit about anyone but himself goes and kind of forms a fatherly attachment, which is and of course I became familiar with Troy Baker when he played Snow in Final Fantasy 13, but he obviously grew from there, and he's a great talent. I really loved him in Death Stranding. They totally didn't use that character enough. I forget the name. The guy that wears like he's the bad guy with like the skull mask,
and he has like the cool. I haven't played that, but that's.
Oh, he has like a cool. Have you seen the pictures of this guy?
Seen
he has
the
like
trailer.
A cool Egyptian cape and stuff like that with like all the weird.
So cool.
Oh, he's great. It's great. So I want to also touch on a couple of other characters, if I might. And I kind of wonder if any of these stick out to you like they stick out to me. One character I really want to talk about is Jeremiah Fink. Jeremiah Fink's VO is awesome as well, and the different messages he has, especially when you go to his factory, it's like hysterical. And like his little town where he's basically trying to like just not get them to unionize and organize, and so all of the messages are about that. And I do like how it feels a little bit like a connection to the original BioShock. And Fink's almost, he Fink's the businessman, right? And now you'll find out later that Fink was on Rapture, but I do like the connection there. I feel like it's overt. There's an overt echo between the original BioShock and BioShock Infinite. He almost feels like an Andrew Ryan type. And I like how he has his own thing and actually a competition with Comstock. And it's interesting because it goes to show you that even though Comstock and the twins are keeping the city afloat, and there's all this secretive stuff, that there's actually a ton of stuff that they can't control for some reason, including Daisy Fitzroy, who we'll talk about in the Vox Populi. And then Fink and kind of his own, he's got his own thing. He's got his own town, his own employment structure, his own currency, all that kind of stuff. Did this character stick out to you at all?
Yeah, I mean, he was a really fun character, and you get a lot of explanation of him through the voxophones too. You get a lot of depth, get a little color for the character. But it was cool to have that Rockefeller type, that rich industrialist inventor. I think he's the guy. He's the guy whose company is behind manufacturing the Patriots, which I find extremely haunting. I mean, I'm super haunted by those characters. Those characters horrified me, those robots. I thought they were awesome. And it was really cool to have that whole nother dimension in the game where there was a whole sort of a portion of the map or the setting where he played a big part, his factories, his sort of part of his sort of segment.
And his private police force as well.
And his private police, which, absolutely ushered in a whole different host of enemies to deal with at one point. Super, super fun. Again, like it just speaks to that time to have this rich industrialist type. Again, it reminded me of like a Rockefeller, an early Rockefeller or something like that, where you have this whole, and everything, and the corruption that comes with that, comes with the territory with that, and the fact of how he would play into politics, and as Colin said, with the unions. It just spoke to the whole tone of what's coming on. I think, of this whole package, and the fact that he would want to exploit the tares, and that was something that he wanted to get his greedy little meat hooks involved with, and everything like that. So yeah, that was another fun character. And again, another character that also makes it sort of for me, that draws in that complexity. It just didn't stop it at dealing with Comstock and dealing with the Lutesses, but there was other characters introduced into this equation too that flesh out the world, and you could see how the world was built around these people.
What about Cornelius Slate? I really love this character as well because you don't deal with him too much, and you're kind of helping each other in a way in the game. But I love that his whole arc is basically about stolen valor and how Comstock is taking credit for everything he did on the battlefield, and that he's sick of it, and that he's willing to go to the nth degree. I mean, I love the Hall of Heroes where you see you go in and there's like a fork, and you can go to the Wounded Knee scene, or you can go to the Peking scene, and you get a little bit of the alternate history that's involved in the game. But I just love how there's this military guy who secedes basically, and almost like in a very Confederate way goes with Comstock, only to kind of have his glory robbed from him, and how he's turning on him. Did this character stand out to you? Yeah,
I mean, I love that. I mean, he reminded me of, he was probably the best proxy for like a Metal Gear Solid character. I don't know why he reminded me of that, but yeah, to have this soldier character who I guess, essentially, as you said, falls from grace apparently, and is initially drawn up with Comstock, but then they go their separate ways. And to have somebody of that magnitude then become, I guess, essentially Comstock's enemy. And again, one of those characters that just fleshes out the world and makes you realize what was, all these, for me, it was one of those characters that you realize there's a complexity to all of the infighting, and there's a complexity to all of the, this sort of, I guess, really a war amongst the different factions. And that was, for me, that was one of them. Another character too, where it would be definitely worth playing, in general playing this game a second time around, but just to get the full picture painted for you of this character. It's easy to miss in the throes of all the complexity of the story and how intricate things get.
Yeah, and a lot of, for better or for worse, a lot of the exposition, or some of it, some important exposition happens when you're fighting.
Yes.
So it's easy to get lost in that. But another character we haven't touched on yet is Daisy Fitzroy, and obviously we have to talk about the Vox Populi. I'm really curious what you think about this, because I know you're always struck especially hard by racism.
Yes.
Stuart Johnstone wrote into us and says, "Hey, Super Mario Arty Bros.
Yo.
I was wondering what you guys thought of the racist tone throughout the game. How do you think the developers handled it? And why don't we see more AAA games tackle this subject? Keep up the great work as always."
Thank you.
I think the reaction to this game, contemporaneous to when it came out, is exactly why no one tackles this.
What was the reaction? Tell me about that.
It was incredibly negative from, the very predictable woke crowds that didn't want, can't talk about racism. Racism.
That's crazy.
It's like, well, why not? I mean, he's not a good guy. It's, it's like,
right.
He's the antagonist. So I remember that very well. And I think that if you go back and just go on Google and just search for BioShock Infinite racism, just keep it to 2013, and you'll, I'm sure, come up with all the stupid shit that all these people were writing at the time. And I personally found it to be incredibly riveting, because it's not immediately clear that that's what the game is going to deal with. You especially at Battleship Bay, and we'll talk about that in a little while, you start to learn about how fucked up everyone is. And I do want to get specifically into that because I think it's an overlooked part of the game. But you don't really know that there's this basically insurgency you don't, first of all, you don't know anything, obviously, when you're getting to Columbia, but there's the layer below all of this other shit is that there is a deeply, profoundly racist civil war going on with a permanent underclass, and Daisy Fitzroy is the leader of this underclass. So I'm very curious to hear what you think of her.
Yeah, I mean, the whole racial element, first of all, I commend a game developer or a studio, a guy like Ken Levine and company and team really trying to put, say something with the game. It's okay to, say a message, challenge us with things like the real world things that we deal with, especially now contemporaneously. Like, racism is something we're dealing with. It's not going away, apparently. Look at everything that happened last year and into this year. Sure. So the fact that it was shocking for me to see that in a game. I very rarely have witnessed a game dealing with real life issues like that. But for me, it was a huge draw into the game and a huge emotional touchstone for me to get into the game. And, a stake, it became stakes for me because especially early on, again, pre-Elizabeth, it's pretty difficult to hitch your wagon to Booker for me. It was like, wow, this guy's, what am I drawing up? I'm drawing up allies with this guy. Like, who is he? He's committed atrocities. He's obviously a bad dude. He's a known Pinkerton ally. Like he's just an unsavory guy. He's kind of a bastard. Like, what am I riding with this guy for? And then when you realize how hideous the people he's set to fight against are, that's, for me, it came in, it was like, oh, this is what we're fighting against. Okay. Like, that whole scene where he's tasked, he gets his number drawn and he could throw the ball at the black couple on stage. That whole thing was like, wow, this is really hideous. So when the Vox Populi were introduced and sort of Daisy Fitzroy's faction, I'm thinking like, this is like the anti-Comstock contingent, right? This is the abolitionists essentially. And this is who, now I'm thinking like, this is who Booker is going to draw up with. This is who he's going to get in bed with, and he's going to fight against Comstock's faction with the Vox Populi, which are like this abolitionist or anti-fascist, whatever group fighting against Comstock and his racism and all that kind of stuff. And then you realize that the Vox Populi they have pretty ugly tactics of their own. They're not shying away from their own hideous, doing whatever they have to do to fight back, which are pretty hideous things, killing innocent people and all that kind of stuff. Then you realize like, this is a fucked up world. Like, even the people who I thought were going to be the good guys, or the side on the group on the side of justice, are just as ugly as Comstock's group, So then you realize, okay, now I don't hope that I'm drawing up with these people that, they have you running out for these guns. And then you realize there's a lot of corruption involved. There's a lot of really brutal cutthroat tactics. And the fact that this group is also corrupt, this group is also wrongheaded, essentially. So that was another thing. It's like, talk about subverting expectations along every step of the way. We talk about some of the best fiction doing that. This game just did that for me over and over again. It's like and it's trying to find that through line through the game of like, who am I drawing up sides with? Who am I allying myself with? Who am I fighting for? And you constantly have to second guess that throughout the game. It really makes for an adventure where the stakes stay high throughout the whole thing. And the Vox Populi were really a shock for me because I'm thinking like, this is where the game's going to end up. I'm going to kind of arrive on the side of these people and we're going to help them out. But it doesn't turn out that way at all.
No, it really just becomes, it's cool. I remember that being a big problem too, is that they didn't end up being the good guys.
Right.
And it really is only about you and Elizabeth at the end of the day. Because you realize also, I mean, you don't know at the time, when you realize you're Comstock, you're just fighting yourself anyway. So just in a different timeline. So you had brought up the Vigors before. I wanted to ask you about this. We haven't talked too much about the gameplay yet. Peter Sismigu wrote in and said, hey, best brothers, I'm sure I'm in the minority, but my favorite game in the franchise is BioShock Infinite. I agree Rapture is unparalleled as a setting and as the atmosphere it creates, but I enjoyed playing Infinite a bit more than the first two games. Columbia is very special. The story is mind-bending. The gunplay is excellent. And I think that makes Infinite the most replayable out of all the BioShock titles. My question is, what was your favorite vigor and weapon in the game? For me, it's Murder of Crows and Sniper Rifle, he says. I barely use a sniper rifle in the game, personally. I'm curious what you gravitated towards, because you had said that you maybe weren't using the Vigors as much as you could have been. No. And that's surprising to me because they're so awesome in this game. This is one of the things I think that BioShock Infinite definitively does better than the original BioShock, which is that it kind of collapses this complex system of Vigors and upgrades and all of that and makes it into something a little more manageable. I don't always think that folding things down makes sense in a game, but when you go back and play the original BioShock with an open mind, you realize that there's a lot of shit in the game you really don't need and that doesn't do anything useful. There's like really useful shit and then a bunch of other stuff. And instead of complicating the matter, they got down to business and really focused in the weapon. There's a lot of weapons, but in terms of the, there's only 8 Vigors in the game, eight powers you can use. So it's Bucking Bronco, Murder of Crows, Shock Jockey, Devil's Kiss, Possession, Charge, Return to Sender, and Undertow. I think that's the order you find them in, something like that. What didn't you like about them, or why didn't you use them?
It was really strange, Kyle. Like, for some reason, I just wanted to play this as a first-person shooter. And I think what played into it in retrospect and thinking about it was the fact that it's notoriously not a difficult game, right? I played it on medium difficulty. I didn't play it on the most difficult setting, but I played it on the median difficulty. And I think that I just didn't need them, coupled with the fact that I just enjoyed the first-person shooter aspects of the game. Now, you're limited, of course, to 2 guns at a time, but I loved using the guns, finding out which ones were the best for each situation, and powering up the guns through via the armory. I thought it was really fun. And then only late in the game, it was literally one of the last battles, I think, when you're defending Comstock's airship against the oncoming, like an onslaught of like Zeppelins and gunships, and they're sending down Patriots and there's soldiers rappelling down. And that was the first battle where I really found that like it's not enough, like what I'm doing with the guns and just, constantly making sure my shield is replenished and getting health packs, and that wasn't enough. Like I had to start using Vigors at that point, really start. And I toyed around with them in throws throughout the adventure. Like I would use, I found out that Return to Sender was really good against snipers, especially if you couldn't see them initially. So just casting that out and then finding where they were, it would just shoot back, essentially. So I found out, there were certain things that I would employ, but I also played this game. I like to be stealthy. I don't like to just run out and just sort of scrap with everybody. So I like to, find cover, find a good position for shooting. I really loved the rhythms of this game, of the combat in this game, where it felt like they would throw you into a combat situation and you would get through it. And then they would give you a little respite. They would give you a little period to sort of reload, restock, power up your guns, salt up, med pack up, all that kind of stuff. And then you would be thrown into another battle again. And there was a really nice rhythm in this game with that I noticed, where it was like they really made it enjoyable. And I think I just kind of fell into that, where it was like I was even forgetting about the Vigors for large portions of the time. Then only late in the game that I realized these are amazing. And I started using Shock Jockey paired with, I loved the carbine. And I found the carbine to be long range. It had a little more ammo than the sniper rifle, almost as effective at long range as a sniper rifle, and very powerful and very even keeled as far as like there was no recoil really. You could simmer down a recoil to almost nothing. I think the carbine only holds 12 shots at a time, so you have to reload a lot, but it's strong. I love the carbine. I love the machine gun just for going in and spamming enemies. I think it holds 70 bullets at a time at a clip, and I enjoyed that. And then I ended up mistakenly using the burst gun and powering that thing up. It was the gun with the big X in the scope.
Yeah.
And really that was a mistake. I shouldn't have used that gun. I was put off by, I noticed that they were giving you a lot of opportunities to power up the pistol, and I sort of ignored that. I didn't like the shotgun in the game. I felt like it was too much of a close range weapon, but perhaps if I powered that up a little more. But I loved using Shock Jockey, and I loved using Devil's Kiss as like an over, attack that would actually kill an enemy, using the fire. And bucking Bronco, dude, I missed out on that. Like, I could have really had fun with that in the game, where you levitate the enemy, sort of take them out for a bit, and then shoot them while they're up there, or at least keep them out of the fight while you deal with this one. Then you can go back.
Yeah, bucking
So
Bronco's
I
great.
love that. I love the fact that you could kind of couple, just like with BioShock, you're dealing with different enemies in this, different types of enemies, but you could kind of couple your vigors with your gun, and they seem to really think out the way certain guns worked with certain vigors, and just, using Shock Jockey to subdue the guy on this side so you could take out the guys on the right. And I thought the combat was a lot of fun, but I accidentally kind of slept on the vigors until late in the game when you really needed them. And I feel like with that battle, they were saying that. It was like, if you made it this far, we know it was relatively easy, but if you made it, there's no way you're winning that, because you have to defend that ship against this onslaught. It's like 20 minutes or something. And it is patterned. You do get used to it after a while. You know what's coming, and that's the battle where you could send Songbird to attack the different pockets, the different airships or guys on the ground. But that was the first time I really needed to use it, and I spent hours at that part because I really didn't know how to use my vigors well, and that I got good at it. And it just, again, it was like one of the brilliant things of this game. It just makes it ended up being enjoyable. Something that should have been frustrating ended up being really enjoyable. And I think I do enjoy the combat. I mean, there's something really special about the initial BioShock, BioShock proper, the big daddies, that combat. But I do like the combat, I think, the best in Infinite of the three.
Yeah, it's certainly the most combat heavy. And I'm looking at a list of the weapons just so I don't forget any. I really like the hand cannon, which is like the revolver pistol, that like one-shot revolver pistol. I'm super into that. I think the carbine's a great choice as well. In terms of vigors, you can really get clever with them. A possession is a really great one, because if you upgrade it and you use it on someone, they kill themselves at the end. They literally turn their guns on themselves and kill themselves.
Oh,
which
I
is
didn't
kind of cool.
experience that. That's awesome.
And Undertow is really cool because you can basically just shoot people off the sides of the ship and they just fall off.
So cool. And groups. Undertow is good for groups.
Right, exactly. So it's pretty cool. I mean, I like that it was a little more limited, because I usually am like that too, where if a game doesn't force you to use something, I'm typically not going to use it. I'm actually pretty, I criticize a lot of games for doing that.
Yeah, you always say that.
Yeah, but I played the game on 1999 mode, which is the hardest mode, where you can't buy items and like you can't do a bunch of shit.
Oh, that's the Konami code mode?
Yeah,
I had just recently read about that. Okay.
And you can unlock it at the end too, but you can just unlock it immediately by using the Konami code. And
did you beat it on that setting?
Yeah, I beat it in 2018 on that setting, and then I beat it again on that setting.
Wow. I'm impressed.
And you have to use the vigors like crazy amount of times. By the way, when you found the infusions, which did you infuse yourself with first? I go all shields before I did anything else.
Oh, literally all shields?
Yeah, because it's so valuable when you think about it, right? It's like health that keeps coming back. So it's
totally
like I dump 10 into shields before I do anything else. Yeah.
That's a really good obvious strategy that I missed out on. Yeah, I did all shields and some life. Didn't do any. I don't think I did one for the vigors until late in the game, where I just literally felt bad for the vigors. And I was like, I'll just kick one over to the vigors, But yeah, all shield and life for me.
And I know the gear in the game's kind of cool too, where you get like a hat and pants and stuff that you can wear. I know a lot of people find this very RNG heavy. It is. It's totally random. Like what you're going to get. You can't force the game to give you anything.
Yes.
But I like the different permutations of those too, especially there's one that's so valuable, that's like so overpowered, where you can, every time you jump off of a skyline, you free, your health freezes. So basically you have like infinite health for a little while. So if you just keep jumping off the skylines and coming back, especially in the last battle, it's really useful. And we didn't bring up the skyhook or the skylines. What did you think of that whole mechanic? I actually must say, even the first time I played it all the way through and really loved it, I wasn't crazy about the skyhook. And then when I played it again a month or so ago in preparation for this episode, I was like, I dig this a lot more now. It's certainly fun and kinetic. I was just like, it feels gimmicky I don't know what the purpose of this is, but it actually is pretty awesome. What did you think of that?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's probably the other aspect, honestly, besides the vigors, of something I could have employed more in the, throughout my adventure. But I understand now, especially late in the game, that it really is an offensive tool, especially in combat, because you're much less easily targeted when you're flying on that thing. I love the way the skyhook is also your melee weapon. I thought that was very clever. And I love the fact that the skyways, the sky rails or whatever were, that's basically their shipping. It's basically their rail lines. It's basically the shipping system of Columbia. So I thought that was really clever. And I love modeling it after a roller coaster and trying to make something thrilling and stuff like that. It was a little bit, it wasn't one of the aspects that I really sort of employed too often. But it's another dimension where I would like to go back and see what I could have done. Yeah. And see what I could have done had I used those more. Because again, that last, when you're defending the God's Hand or whatever, I think that's Comstock's airship from that onslaught, there are the rail systems there, and just getting around and getting to things quicker. Getting to tears where you could unlock health packs or get the sniper rifle or, get some salts or whatever, getting around, getting behind your enemies and stuff like that, especially getting behind the Patriots because they're weak back, they have a weakness in their back and stuff like that. If you shoot their little clockwork gears back there and stuff like that. But I thought it was really fun. I think it's another thing where it's like, it's another thing. It's another dimension of the combat. And just, the gameplay that's, it's nice that it's there.
Now, we brought up Songbird a couple times and some of these other enemies. I'm especially intrigued to talk to you about Handyman. But before we do, we should stick with Songbird. What did you think of I love the design of this character, but also the weird relationship it has with Elizabeth and all of that. It's quite haunting and quite creepy, but I love the look of it. It almost doesn't feel like it even belongs in the game. It's got this almost leathery black gunmetal kind of look to it. It's very, very strange. What did you think of Songbird?
Yeah, it's one of those elements that drives the whole steampunk thing home. Again, this game's really genre bending. You have sci-fi, you have dystopian thriller, you have some steampunk elements, but I love that. The old sort of clockwork, old-timey mech thing with Songbird, really an eerie character. The fact that, that screech, that hideous screech that just runs up your spine. It's crazy. And the fact that, you have this character, this Elizabeth character locked up in the tower, Rapunzel-like, and then you have this sentinel that, is designed to guard over her and designed to take it as like a personal affront that she wants to escape. It was really eerie. I mean, I love that. I love the character. I love later on when, it was unfortunate that probably one of the weaknesses of the game that you never really get to fight it. It was always in FMV sequences and the cutscenes and stuff where you get to really get a good look at it. Later on, you get to command it, of course, in that battle that I was talking about. But it would have been cool to have a proper, battle against it. Would have been really like a nice, an epic boss fight. And I don't know. I feel like they kind of missed an opportunity with that.
Yeah, you almost feel like it's building up to that. Maybe that's another subversion because you almost feel like, well, this must be the bad guy. You had brought up the motorized Patriots several times. They're all over the place.
I hate them.
The game. They're awesome. I love them. Horrifying.
Oh, so scary.
And I love that you actually see them first. I don't know if you noticed this, like they're actually on display in certain places, but they're not. And like, so it's very creepy. What did you make of these guys?
Oh, dude. Rejoice, for death has no sting.
Yeah.
Dude,
we hold these truths to be self-evident.
I mean, so brilliant. I mean, hulking. They seem like they're 9 feet tall, and they're either like in the likeness of Lincoln or Washington or Ben Franklin. And then they have that, that really, I guess, primitive Terminator-esque metal mask underneath that sort of clay president mask, and then they have wooden teeth, which is really kind of cute. That's really interesting. But dude, I think I go out and walk the dog at night. I think one of them are going to get me. I'm like that scared of these things. I don't know why, they just haunted me. And then every time you get in combat, every time you would hear one of those quotes, the deep booming voice with the quote, mercy belongs to the Lord, it's like, oh shit. Like I would just lose it. I would just like panic. Thank God I didn't know how to use Vigors, because I can't even handle my gun at that point. I was like really they really freaked me out. And the one thing with the AI in combat, which I found out, is that at first I thought it was kind of tricky because first of all, those things could run and they could jump, which is, you can't make a monster do that kind of stuff. I need to feel somewhat safe. You know what I mean? But, they're smart. And if you hide for long enough, they'll come and get you. Like you can't hole up behind something and try to pop out and pepper them slowly. Like they're not going to let you do that.
It's like a Michael Myers type thing where they'll
totally Michael Myers.
Why would you run if you're not guilty? I love when it says that.
And the fact that you could take their guns, their Gatling guns, their crank guns was super. And the crank gun, the delay on the crank gun was so cool. That was like a tangible, tactile feature where it was like you had to pick up this gun and start firing it, and it had to start winding. There was that brief period where it wasn't going to shoot at first. I love that. I love little details like that.
Yeah, it's very cool. And I love that you brought up the Lincoln part, because those are the Vox Populi like hacked versions, and they turn them into Abraham Lincoln, which is super cool because, and we'll talk about this towards the end of the show because I want to talk about something specifically. Like Abraham Lincoln's like an enemy in Colombia for obvious reasons, because he's anti-racist. Now, I do wonder, I'm surprised that the motorized Patriot's what scared you the most, because there are two other enemies in the game that I think are much scarier. The first one I want to talk about is actually one we see a little later in the game, the Boys of Silence.
Oh,
I'm curious.
So cool.
I'm curious what you made of these creatures. So just metal heads, no eyes, and then these huge kind of horns on their ears so they can hear. Those to me are probably amongst the creepiest things in all the BioShock games. And I'm thankful that you don't see them very often.
Yes.
What did you make of those guys?
So creepy. What creepy imagery that is. Yeah, just that sort of that astronaut suit with the giant horns on the side. Dude, when I first saw them, I was like, what the hell is that? Because they do come late in the game. You don't see them very often. It's just that one part where you see them. And I had to research them. I didn't know what they were called or anything. And of course, as soon as they hear you and see you, they alert, whatever the zombie-esque soldiers, the undead, whatever the hell they're supposed to be, to come at you. They command the other things to come at you. But dude, they were really creepy. They were really a surprise late in the game. I didn't know anything about them, and like you said, you don't see much of them, so they stay pretty scary. You were kind of waiting for them to pop up again. They never did.
And then the other enemy that I wanted to bring up, although there are others as well, but the handyman. Now, I find the handyman to be horrifying, especially because there are voxophones that explain what's actually going on with them. And I wrote down the quote here. It's an amazing quote. Yeah. So there's a woman talking about her husband that's turned into a handyman.
Yes, I remember.
And she says, better a handyman than a dead one. And what I love about these creatures or these characters is that they're in agony when they're fighting you. They're screaming. They don't want to fight. And they're like almost reluctant, but very aggressive Big Daddy type character. They're easier to kill than Big Daddies, but I love that you can't even stay on the skyhooks because they electrocute the skyhooks and they do all sorts of stuff. They're horrifying. I find them truly horrifying. I like how they have their heart in the piece. You can shoot the heart and do much more damage to them. I'm curious what you think of these guys' designs.
They were scary. They were reminiscent of the Big Daddies for me. And the fact that they scream in agony is crazy. It hurts. You just hear like, oh shit, it's one of them. Like, it's crazy.
It's horrifying. It's like ridiculous how scary it is.
And they're on you in no time. I mean, they are fast. And you know what? They're probably the character, the firemen and the handyman especially, that exploited the one weakness in the game that I found the most disconcerting was the fact of, they were on you so fast that they force you into melee combat, at least to get them to back off for a second so you could get a gun or a Vigor out, right? And I got very turned. I found the melee combat, I really got turned around, and I ended up losing my sense of, where I was a lot of the times. Like the melee combat sort of bounces you off, and the camera seems to lose track of you almost. If I'm explaining it,
no, I think
correctly.
I understand exactly what you mean. Yeah,
and that made those enemies really frustrating in a way, because I felt like they were on you so quick, unless you really knew they were coming, that you were going to have to sort of back them off with your skyhook. And then all of a sudden you're like, your camera's pointing in the air and you're like, where the fuck am I? And you're trying to find out where they are because they're repositioning themselves. The AI is pretty slick. So that was the one thing that reminds me, that the one element of the combat was the melee combat for me, where it was like, it was wanting. It left me wanting a little bit.
Sure. I can understand that. I think what I remember about the melee combat, especially in 1999 mode, is that it's unclear that you're even doing much of any damage. So I would run away. I mean, there were handyman fights where that would take a half an hour for me because I would literally just be up and down, like trying to take a shot at them and then getting back on the skyhook, and then they electrocuted and like, get down.
You were on difficult settings too.
Yeah. I like making the games as hard as I can usually. The games I can handle. I can't handle all games like at that level, but when they're like, get down, and then you have to, and I'm like, oh no, and then you got to get off the skyhook. There's a lot of good audio cues in the game. There's tons of wonderful stuff like that. Now, we have this question here I think will allow us to wrap things up or begin to wrap things up, although we can talk about whatever you want that we haven't touched on. There's so much to talk about, of course.
There is.
Stephen Short wrote in and said, writing this as I awe at my favorite... I'm sorry. He says, writing this as I awe at my framed BioShock Infinite poster on my man cave wall.
Ooh.
Infinite is one of my favorite games of all time. After the game came out, I endlessly discussed the end and its meaning with my friends, and now as an adult, I yearned to experience more of the hidden side stories. One of my favorites is that of Preston Downs, the hunter hired to track down Daisy Fitzroy, who accidentally maims a young native child and chooses to care for him. He can't understand the child, but feels immense guilt after having to cut off his leg when he was caught in a bear trap set for one of Fitzroy's messengers, only to find out children were used. He switches sides, however, after meeting Booker DeWitt in an alternate timeline and finding out he can communicate with the child, telling him all about the Vox and Comstock. Such a special game, and one I will always hold dear to my heart. So that's told in voxophones. And it's a great story with Preston Downs. The one thing I wrote down here that I really wanted to talk about, and there's two things in this regard of like stories or random things in the game that I really love. The first is Battleship Bay, and I brought this up earlier. This is the beach, like the artificial beach. What's cool about this is not only that it's an artificial beach, but in the game, and I'm sure you noticed this, there's not many NPCs for most of the game, except for in the beginning and on Battleship Bay.
Yeah.
But if you walk up to almost any NPC in the game, you can listen to them talk. Sometimes they talk for a long time. And I think a lot of people don't realize this because they're rushing through the game. But Battleship Bay is the place where there is tons of exposition about what's going on if you talk to everyone there. And I wrote down all of the themes. These are all of the themes that are in Battleship Bay that people talk about if you go up and listen to them, right? They talk overtly about racism, completely racist conversations.
Yeah.
Prostitution, abortions, cheating and infidelity, Darwinism, racial and social conflict, mixing, in quotes, the demeanor of servants, all that kind of stuff. If you go and talk to these people, like they just have conversations in front of you. And I really loved that because it allowed you to get away from the box phones a little bit and learn a little bit more in a very similar way, audio cues that I really loved. And the other thing that there's two other things that I wrote down here. We talked about Finks before. There's a scene when you fight the first handyman in that same, like, I don't know what it is, plaza or whatever. If you pay attention, you don't have to see it, but there's an auction going on. Did you notice this? There's an auction for people trying to get work. And
I don't know if I noticed.
It's a reverse auction where they're auctioning for how cheap everyone will do it. So instead of the numbers going up, there's like three people and they're like, we need this. And they're like, I'll do it for $1. I'll do it for 50 cents. I'll do it. And they choose people that way.
I don't know if I remember that.
Yeah, it's an awesome scene. I love it. It's just happening. Like you can just stand and watch it. It goes on for like minutes. And I really love that as well. And then the third thing is when you meet, it's not when you meet the crows for the first time, which are awesome enemies too, but when you go and you find out that the crows are basically a cult that worships John Wilkes Booth. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like you go
No, I think I missed this.
So there's a building where you fight the crows in this building, like it's their building or whatever. And they're obsessed with John Wilkes Booth. If you look at there's a huge statue of him. And then if you look at all of these different things, like they're a cult of personality around the personality of John Wilkes Booth.
Dude, that's
who is the man who murdered Abraham Lincoln.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So it's super, there's like a ton of awesome overt and not so overt storytelling in the game.
Yeah.
And I think that in some ways, Columbia is bigger, I think, than than Rapture. What you see of Rapture, it's certainly not bigger in the main, but from what you see of it, and I think they do a nice job of geographic variety, but also of packing every square inch with some sort of story. Like I even love, it's towards the beginning of the game when you're running through different people's houses and you get to see kind of how the upper class live.
I love that.
And so there's a lot of different stuff. And also you get to see how the poor live as well. In Rapture, you really only get to hear about the Civil War in the first game and then kind of see the results of the addiction to the plasmids and all that kind of stuff. In this game, you kind of see how everyone lives a little more intimately. Like you see it in the real world. You're not hearing stories about it. You're not hearing voxophones about it. You're seeing the parades. You see Comstock's cult. You see the crows worshiping John Wilkes Booth. You see the founder statue. You see, I think it's to Stephen's inquiry, there's so much around every little corner. So is there anything that stands out to you in this regard? That
so much nuance. Yeah. I love those examples. I love the beach. When you first, it's shades of old school Atlantic City. The people, Definitely. What they're saying. I wish I knew more to listen to all those conversations. I remember being there for a while because it's not too soon after you meet Elizabeth. It's when you first have her in tow. And that's where she wants to dance on the beach and she wants to explore and she goes off on her own and stuff like that. So that was really cool. Again, like really indicative of the period, what the people are wearing, those full body bathing suits and all that kind of stuff, their parasols and all that kind of thing. It really lended to the look and the aesthetic. But there's so many memorable moments for me. I mean, the carnival was really fun where you get to play, you get to explore and see people enjoying themselves, but you also get to play some of the games and earn some loot, which was really neat. I loved one part I wrote down that I was really struck with, and it's very Dagan, I guess, is Soldiers Field, the arcade and sort of the welcome center there with the big cartoon eagles statues and they're in the battleships or whatever. And you realize like this is Columbia for kids. It's like, but it's the same shit. It's like teaching them like we're the best, super nationalist, super racist, but like a kiddie version of that.
Yeah, and isn't there a cartoon in the game throughout, like Dim and Dimwit or something like that?
Exactly. Shout out to them. So the whole thing that the kids were being sort of, they were bringing on board for this too. They were being essentially brought along or...
Yeah, well said.
Which was really, really, really neat. And, the whole thing with Monument Island, just in general, and the giant hulking angel statues sort of looking down on you, sort of bearing down on you and watching. I thought that was really eerie. They took religious religious symbolism and sort of turned it into something that seemed a little more, seemed creepy and seemed like a little nefarious, which was really interesting. Even naming Columbia after the guardian angel that Comstock was supposedly visited by, right? The whole inspiration for him building this paradise in the sky and creating his own thing and creating this whole thing in the spirit of God and the heavens and what an American should be and all that kind of stuff. It's so, just to have all of that fabric woven in to, it's not, you could say it's just it's one of those first person shooters. It's fun. It's fluid. The graphics are beautiful. I really want to talk to you about the graphics real quick too. But
sure.
You have all of this, you have this great tapestry sort of embroidered and put behind all of this, all of this stuff written and all of this stuff that's, world building, like you said, and it sounds like you really have explored this game, Kyle. It's definitely worth going in and sort of getting all of that, so seeing how much you could glean or how much you missed the first time around. Even somebody that spent as much time with it as I did the first time. And a lot of that was due to just having fun with the combat.
Sure.
But the fact that it's, it's so replay, a game like this, you wouldn't think is necessarily replayable, but the replay value is huge.
Yeah. And you're exactly right. Just because it's linear, it's totally linear. It's much more linear even than the original BioShock.
Good point.
So yeah, talk to me a little bit about the graphics. The game runs on Unreal 3. So it's a pretty antiquated game now. I don't know if they moved it to 4 for PS4, but I still think the game looks really good. I played the PS4 version in 2018, but like I said, I played the PS3 version last month because I wanted the trophies that I didn't get in the game. So I went back and played it, and I'm like, it's still. So I was playing on my PS3 Slim. It looked great. I mean, it certainly doesn't look like a modern game, but I think it's still holds up incredibly well. Beautiful color palette, nice animations. Some questionable character designs, I guess, with some of the NPCs and whatnot, but almost uncanny valley stuff. But what did you want to call out specifically as an artist?
I wanted to ask you how it held up as a contemporary gamer that's privy to playing, almost every major game that comes out. And for me, it held up extremely well. I couldn't believe I was playing a PlayStation 3 game in some regards. I was like, wow, this game really holds up 8-9 years on. It's gorgeous. And not just graphically, it's very atmospheric. When you have that metropolis set in the sky and you have those cloud effects and things look really fuzzy off in the distance, especially this stuff in the sky. You see the distant statues that are sort of popping up over that cloud cover, and the way, everything looks foggy and soft and muted when it's further away. And not only that, but just the art direction, like the colors used all seem appropriate for its time. It's inventive, it's colorful, but nothing goes out of context in terms of period. Again, just kind of doubling down in that world building and the believability. You have this giant robot bird and all this incredible shit going on. You have this cloud, this cloud-based city, and everything's interlocking, and it's unbelievable, but it seems so believable. That's when a creation is successful, when it works. And it just works so well. I was so surprised by it. I really thought it was going to be, a milking of the BioShock name. For some reason, I just thought that. I don't know why I even thought that. But, it was such a treat for me to see, like, this is a game that stands on its own. Like, and I love the bravery associated with making it such a departure from what made BioShock successful initially.
Yeah, it takes balls, definitely.
It takes balls to do that. Yeah. And when it's so brilliantly realized like this and so lovingly done, it pays, and that's just it's an example. It's proofs in the pudding that you could do that, and I think that's a lesson for all creators, no matter what you do, video games or otherwise.
Certainly. It just makes me hungry for what he's going to do next, Ken. And
smart dude.
Yeah, he's great. And I really should have said this at the top. Ken Levine's like kind of a personal friend of mine, so I should have said that at the very top.
He tweeted at you during the week, didn't he? Yeah, I'm not name dropping. You didn't say it. I said it.
Yeah, no, he didn't. He tweeted. Yeah, we DM sometimes and talk behind the scenes, but yeah, he tweeted at me something when I said I complimented walnuts, I think.
Oh, that's what it was.
He took umbrage with that.
Yeah.
So I should note that we are friends. In case you want to take everything I say with
Smart dude, though. I mean, really.
I mean, I love him. I mean, I love him, and I love that he knows I love him, and I love that he still like befriended me.
Yeah.
Because BioShock is, we became kind of friendly because I wanted to write a book about BioShock. I think the audience knows that, and so he and I talked for a long time about it.
That would be cool.
It would have been, but it just wasn't matching up for, like, they don't want to really talk about BioShock anymore, like they don't want to he wants to associate with it, of course, but what he's doing is not BioShock. And so I think that them endorsing something that is BioShock related wouldn't really make any sense.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, that does make sense when you put it in that term, and you move on, you create something wonderful, has a life of its own. It goes on. Look, I mean, we're doing a show on it 8 years later, singing its praises. These things aren't going to go away. Then you, as a creator, you want to move on to the next thing. And I'm sure his next thing will be, just from his track record, I'm sure his next thing will be a departure too, but you would imagine it's going to be something, lovingly crafted and from the heart. He's a storyteller. I mean, that's essentially what he is.
His team is much smaller too. I know that a lot of people were kind of conjecturing like that he kind of burned his bridges with 2K, but 2K is publishing this game. So clearly they want to be back with Ken, and I think they might even own the studio, because Irrational doesn't exist anymore. Of course, that used to be called 2K Boston, and then Irrational, and then they closed them. And the studio Ghost Story now is way smaller, so I think that's why it's taking. I think there might only be 30 of them or something. It's really small for.
Wow, that's a small team. Now, is it a lot of his stable from previous iterations, or
I think he took like the people that he kind of wanted with him, without keeping the studio too bloated. There are a few really great guys that worked on BioShock that have went elsewhere. Walt Whitman, not Walt Whitman. Walt Williams is one of them. He's the writer of Spec Ops: The Line and Star Wars Battlefront 2. So he worked with him for a while and spun off. But yeah, I think a lot of those guys are still with him. And I think Rod Ferguson, who's the director or was the creative director of Gears for a long time, I think came in as the closer for this game when it wasn't being finished. I think he came in to help. So
wow.
There are a lot of people that are that are associated with both BioShock and BioShock Infinite. The one last thing I guess I should ask you, Dave, before we begin to wrap this up is, or wrap it up totally, is what did you make of the ending? You know, we didn't talk too much about the Lutece twins. I think a lot of that is because a lot of their story is going to come in the Burial at Sea a little bit more, but I'm wondering what you thought of their appearances and all of that, and then how the game kind of wrapped up, because it is very meta and weird.
It is.
And I still don't, I mean, I've read about it and stuff. I still don't know that I really totally understand. I get the broad strokes, but I don't know that I get the depth of it.
I don't blame you. Yeah. I think the Lutece twins is one of the most confusing aspects of the game. I got the fact that, you know, Lutece was the one who developed the technology to, you know, along with Comstock, in Comstock's employ, I guess, to develop how this floating city is going to levitate. And the fact that the male version was apparently this interdimensional version of her, like Comstock, like Booker was an interdimensional version of Comstock, right? Like
exactly.
They existed, different iterations existed in different dimensions. When it gets into the whole interdimensional thing, you know, it's like we talk about with Interstellar or something. It gets very confusing because it's something as humans, I don't think, it's fantasy. It's hard to wrap even if there's a lot of scientific basis there, it's hard to wrap our heads around that. You know, we don't know. It's like time travel. It's like, what? Like, it's just like, it's too big. It's too much. But I love the fact that, you know, they were the Lutece twins were such a big part of the mystery. You know, that you got these two characters.
They kept showing up, right? Like, it was kind of cool. Up. Like, and they would always have these really clever conversations with each other.
Yeah, finishing each other's sentences. Mm-hmm. It was surreal. It was almost Alice in Wonderland. Like, as soon as you're in this combat or you're in this situation, here comes these two twins. Are they ghosts? Like, what the hell's going on? They're saying crazy shit. They're finishing each other's sentences. They always seem very upbeat or even keeled, even when even in dangerous environments or in the right before battle, right after battle. The fact that they would pop up and say such strange things in strange places, it was just one of those things of like, what am I not knowing yet? One of those strings that, you know, it's a carrot that keeps you going through the game. There's a lot of those, I feel like. I think characters, you know, antagonists, there's a lot of things that draw you through, that compel you through this game, you know.
Certainly.
I think that's what makes it work so well. But yeah, the Lutece twins probably left me the most confused, even in learning. And, you know, I cheated too, like YouTube some stuff, like some explanations, read some stuff. You know, I always have to research a little bit. And there's things I miss in games that are more simple than this, you know, certainly. But yeah, for me, that was still the most confusing component. And maybe because it deals with the interdimensional thing, like the lighthouses at the end, right? It's such cool imagery to see this never ending, you know, expanse of lighthouses just go on as far as the eye can see.
And you can see yourself walking to the different ones.
Cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
But what does it mean? And there's different iterations, you know, it was saying, I guess essentially it's saying there's different iterations of us. It just depends on the dimension and how it played out in our relationships and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't think it's even really, you know, we'll have more to say after Burial at Sea, but I almost feel like it's not even that deep in sense. It's very deep, but I don't know that I care what it's saying. You know what I mean? Where it's like, the characters and the journey is so much more interesting than like whatever weird, you know, you never know. You could have been born in Bangladesh. It's like, yeah, I know that. It's like, I don't know that I need so I don't know what they're really, you know, that I really care about. Let me ask you
this question, Kyle.
Yeah, sure.
The fact that, well, it's not the fact that Booker does sacrifice himself at the end. So I guess the fact that Booker never existed would also mean that Elizabeth never existed, right? Because he was doing it so Comstock never existed, right? That's why he was sacrificing himself. Right. Lets the Elizabeths drown him so Comstock never existed, so Columbia would never exist, and this turmoil would never happen. Right.
And so he had to uninvent, because I think the male Lutece is in on the kidnapping of Elizabeth.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, so they have to like, it's quite complex. They have to like kind of undo it all in sequence in order to get Columbia undone, I guess. And then, yeah, when we get back to Rapture, we'll find out how it all wraps up. What do you think is going to happen in Rapture?
First of all, I love tying it back to Rapture. That was another shock, another surprise. I did not see that coming. And you know, maybe there was a little foreshadowing in the beginning because, you start out in the water, you start out in the rowboat with the lighthouse and everything. So maybe I should have saw it coming, but I didn't. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to play into that. You're talking about with the
With Burial at Sea, yeah. Like, what do you anticipate they're going to try to tell you there?
I would imagine that they're gonna. I really don't know. I honestly don't know. It's really subverting my expectations right now. I guess they would have to tie the worlds together somehow. I'm trying to think if that's appealing to me or not. I guess it is. I mean, why not? If you could cleverly sort of string everything together and make these worlds coexist, that's pretty cool. Yeah. If and it seems like everybody loves that DLC, so I'm sure they,
yeah, it's essential. It's a totally essential piece.
I'm
of
looking
DLC.
forward to it for sure.
So we'll do a separate episode of that. We also didn't play. There's a Uncharted. BioShock 2 has DLC that we didn't play either, but I do think that this is
that's
much
right.
more
We never
important.
did do that.
Because the BioShock 2 DLC was written by the guy that wrote Gone Home.
Okay.
So he was working on that game. I can't remember his name right now. And then, sorry, it's so bright. And then I have so many monitors. I'm like the fucking what's that guy in The Matrix 2? It's
oh yeah, is it Tank? No, Tank's
no,
in
not
Matrix
Tank. I'm thinking of he's surrounded by like the architect. He's surrounded by all the monitors.
An array.
Isn't it? What's the comedian's name? I can't think of him. He's like a famous comedian. He's dead. George Carlin.
That's right.
Which was like a totally weird thing.
That was the second.
I think that was the second one.
I only saw that once in the theater, and
Me
I
too.
almost walked
I only saw the last two
out.
matrices once each. So yeah, well, we'll get to it. I think it'll be fun, and yeah, I'm glad that we finally had this conversation. It's just such a wonderful game. I think there's so much to say about it. I think we did it some good justice here today.
I hope so. You know what's another thing to me too? Even the mystery of how she lost the tip of her finger, because they really string you along. I'm like, how wonderful can this payoff be?
Right.
To this missing fingertip. But it's actually excellent. And also, what is it with KnockBack? 2 hot chicks with missing fingertips in 1 month. We had Margot Tenenbaum.
Oh, that's right.
And now we have Elizabeth
/
Anna DeWitt.
Quite the array.
Something weird
of lovely ladies
there. But even that, even the fact that she gets the tip of her finger caught in that tear, it's like, oh, that is kind of a cool payoff. Like, they even made that work.
Yeah, it's super cool. Like it's definitely, I agree. Because I remember in the marketing too, like the whole, I think they might even had a thimble or something in the special edition or something, but they were playing that up. And yeah, so no doubt it doesn't seem like, I'm not obsessive enough with BioShock where I know the hanging threads that people complain about, but I don't know that there really are any.
I'd be surprised.
We'll see though when Cloud Chamber does the next BioShock game. I don't know. Well, let me ask you that. Let's wrap up with this question. We know Cloud Chamber, which is an all new studio 2K owns, is making the next BioShock game. We don't know when it's coming out. I assume we'll see it this year and maybe it'll come out next year, but where will it take place? We've seen the underwater city. We've seen the city in the sky. My theory is it's space, like a space station or something, which I think would be super cool. But I like the idea, and I remember that, like reading that, where it could go back in time. It's very Assassin's Creed-like, but why couldn't it go? And it's not just the setting. It's like Assassin's Creed travels through time. It's literally what it's about. So yeah, I understand that they wouldn't necessarily want to do that, but I think space station is the next obvious place. What I'm afraid of is that they're going to go to Rapture. And I don't want anyone to fuck with Rapture again.
No. Yeah, I would think that would be weird. I mean, there's something, it's like, my animator brain goes to like Ren and Stimpy without John Kay. It's like, why? You know what I mean? Like, it has a shepherd. There was a showrunner involved. There was a Ken Levine involved. There was a Hideo Kojima involved. There was a Shigeru Miyamoto involved. Like, somebody who was, who was born onto Earth to shepherd this IP.
Pardon the pun.
But that's what concerns me about space. I love that idea. I don't think I have a better idea than that. But then you go back to epic things that take place in space, like Dead Space, like the Dead Space franchise, right? And it's like, how do you subvert expectations the most? You just do the most normal thing. They could just make it present day Earth.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
I have no real faith in the game. We don't know anything about it, the studio, but I'll keep an open mind. Why do they want to do it? Because 2K wants lots of money. It's the same reason why Ken Levine got mad at BioShock 2. I mean, he was pretty open about it. I don't think he was happy that they did that. And
BioShock 2 wasn't terrible.
No, not at all. I actually think BioShock 2, if anything, is incredibly underrated.
Fun game.
But I understand his anger, saying like, we're trying to tell a story here, and now you're going to get another team and just like fucking it up. I don't think he even wrote the story, so I don't know that he even really endorses it. You know, like whatever happened in Rapture, I don't think he even like counts it. You know, which is kind of too bad. You know, but that's the way it goes. And if I had a big swinging dick like that, I'd do the same thing.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, that's that is. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up before I wrap this bad boy up?
No, that was fun. I just want to say there's people DMing about our closing segments. I'm very excited. This is one thing I'm excited about in particular for doing the video with you, Kyle, now, is that, you know, we talked about late last year, we want to get back to our closing segments. We think we're going to kind of excise the opening segments and just have a little conversation, little warm up, icebreaker type thing in the beginning. But for the getting back to the closing segment, the visual component, you know, ushers in some new considerations for what we could do. Like, can we go back and do a win, lose, and draw thing? Sure. And now we could see Colin's drawings on video. It might be worth.
What didn't I draw like Jesus on a cross or something?
Oh, dude, they're priceless.
Something horrible.
Those drawings are priceless. But you know, this opens up some new possibilities. People are asking about the debate club topic. We're going to do it. I have at least a couple of dozen arguments. And that was Star Wars prequels versus Star Wars sequels. So it is coming. I'll just get acclimated to doing the video. It doesn't seem like it's going to be that big of a deal. I actually thought
do you feel better now doing it? I mean, do you feel like that? I feel good.
I feel completely great about this. I love doing it. It's not a question of that. It's just, you know, can I live up to the Last Stand Media YouTube
not very
superstar?
Much. I mean, it's very, it's an inch above the ground. I think you can handle it. I asked you this earlier. I don't know if you answered it though. Did you paint your door?
No, you know what? That door, I noticed that in my work Zoom meetings every day. Like that door it's actually forest green, but it looks like, I actually like it because it looks like a nice fresh coat of paint back there. It's not. Yeah. I think it's how we bought the house. And it's KnockBack green. It matches the shirt. Yeah. Next week, much more underdressed, maybe naked. Who knows?
Well,
little
show those nips
for you guys.
Show me those nips. It's perverted. Yeah, and Dagan actually his office in his house that we're seeing now, you're seeing for the first time, is Leonardo is the he's got a nice little blue wall there.
There's a blue wall over there
on the far
blue
side.
Blue accent wall, Leonardo.
Yeah, it's very nice. Yeah, it looks like you. I can't really. I gotta get a better. I haven't been in your house since before COVID, so
I was just thinking of that last night. You haven't been here in a long time.
No, I was at your house constantly for like 2 years, and then I just never came back. I probably came to your house like 8 or 9 times in a year and a half.
It was a lot.
Yeah, I was
we worked hard with that. We did.
What do you think the waitress is doing right now?
The waitress. I was just thinking about her too last night. I was like, because I wanted a burger, and I have no one to go with. Everybody's
I know,
asleep.
and dude, I've only gone to a restaurant once in the last year, like in the last 12 months.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Holy shit!
And it was like Mission Barbecue. It's like nothing. You know, it's like it's not like a sit down restaurant. It's like you go and just get your food and order
Is that due to some trepidation, or is that just due to the situation?
No, it's more situational, you know, but also I got to be honest with you. I've really not been very scared of COVID. Maybe I should be, but I'm not like coughing on people. I'm going to wear my mask and do all my thing. But me personally, I've never been worried about getting it.
Yeah.
You know? I certainly
take precautions. You're smart, but why?
Right. So it's not that.
Why give yourself anxiety over that?
No, exactly. So I actually wear a gaiter, my Cobra gaiter. Yeah, so I'm not like super persnickety about that, but I probably should be. We also have this weird theory that we all got COVID already last year.
Yes, so. A lot of our family says that. Helene's
I don't know. I mean, our family says a lot of things.
They do. They're crazy.
So yeah,
especially you, Dad.
Yeah, Dad.
There we go.
Yeah, we got it. He probably didn't even listen.
We got him on video.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, now he's gonna have to watch. I'm sure he's thrilled about that. All right, Dave, for tradition dictates, if you're new to the show, watching me on YouTube for the first time, we always end with a dad joke.
Always.
So Dagan, hit me with a dad joke.
I got a dad joke. I got dad joke 21121 here. This is in case I read the wrong dad joke. Okay, Kyle, loyal listeners out there. I have a friend who tried to take some selfies in the shower, but they came out too blurry. He had selfie steam issues.
I knew it was going to be something stupid with that.
How did you know? I feel like that's a hard one.
I knew it was going to be something with the water or the steam.
Selfie
or
steam issues.
I didn't think
I shouldn't say how I searched for these.
I've been kind of telegraphing a little bit the last couple of
that was actually a good one. I feel like
that was a good one.
I feel like not only do I feel like that's a good dad joke, I feel like that was a good read by you, But I have this new way of searching for dad jokes, so I get the latest ones, and it seems to be working, which is weird. Like in other words, people are uploading dad jokes to the internet, Google, whatever, a lot. Because there's always new ones every week that I search. So be afraid, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I wonder when someone's going to catch up with you for just straight plagiarizing all the dad jokes.
I worry about it every day. I get a lot of people
You're the Carlos
DMing.
Mencia of dad jokes.
He's been reading my dad jokes for 3 years. Maybe it'll get me on Rogan, though.
That'll be great.
So
that'll be fun.
However it happens, that's fine.
He's in Texas now, so.
That's right.
I don't listen to him too much anymore now that he's not on.
I haven't really too much.
Because I actually love Spotify, but I don't subscribe to podcasts there.
And what does he do now? He just puts clips on YouTube, not entire shows.
Yeah, and only the entire show will live on Spotify now. I mean, you paid him so much money. I mean, that makes sense, but...
Makes sense.
Well, Dig, that was an excellent dad joke. Excellent episode.
I had fun. I had a blast.
It was good. All about BioShock Infinite. We're glad to finally deliver this. Thank you for voting for the topic. Remember, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia for early ad-free access to this show, as well as Sacred Symbols Plus, Defining Duke Ultimate. We have a lot of content churning now, and we'll start putting these knockback episodes up if they do well enough on YouTube. I'm not expecting meteoric rising in numbers, but if you guys are interested,
I actually am expecting that.
Yeah, Dig wants that, but we'll see. We're going to reach a whole new audience. I've always felt that knockback deserves a bigger audience, and I need to figure out a way to get it in front of people. And I felt like YouTube's because we do a lot of topics. Well, not a lot, but we do some topics like we did Rosemary's Baby or something like that, where I don't know that fits on our YouTube channel. I don't know that we would necessarily put that up there. But with BioShock Infinite, next week we're going to do one about Star Wars and all that. I feel like many of them fit. So what I think we'll do, I got to kind of talk to Dustin, but I think we'll just record all of them and then we'll just put up the ones we feel like we want to. All of the audio will, of course, go up. But
right. That's a good strategy. I like that. Helene told me not to wear these, but I'm going to put them on. Now, listen, also...
Oh, yeah, you can't wear those because of the glare.
The glare is too much.
I mean, it's fine. Yeah, see, I can see your monitor. Now, if I had a microscope, I can read your monitor.
Look at that. Oh, yeah, look. You probably could do... But listen, what I was going to say was...
Is that a picture of a dick?
Hey, I have my other monitor open here. I got to keep myself entertained.
Busting my balls!
Oh! Our first video. Oh. What was I going to say to you?
I'm sorry. I totally didn't know.
If this is too light, if this face is a little too much for you, I could just go LED. I got full LED here. We could do dark.
Do you really?
I do. I got full LED.
Well, we'll try that next time. Yeah.
We'll try the LEDs next time. Now I got even the Colin got these nice accent lights that he sent me and stuff like that. But
yeah, we got you everything, and we got to get you new headphones. So
yeah, these are my sons.
Are those what are those Sennheisers?
I have no idea what they are. What does it say?
I don't know. ISK.
ISK.
I never heard
it's
of
a good brand.
Definitely not Sennheiser. He's not a Sennheiser, man. All right. Dig, thank you for your time. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of our show. We'll talk to you next time for more Knockback. Until then, goodbye.
Bye.
Knockback, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. Knockback's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including Knockback, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.